Okay, so buckle up because this deep dive is going to take us deep into theoretical physics. We're talking supersymmetry, extra dimensions, all that good stuff.
Yeah, we're diving into some seriously mind-bending concepts today.
And we've got some fascinating research to guide us. Excerpts from Edward Witten's 1999 paper, right? The one exploring the supersymmetric index of three-dimensional gauge theory.
Witten's paper. Oh, it's a classic. Dense, yes, but full of those aha moments that make physics so captivating.
For sure. Now, for anyone just tuning in, and I doubt there are many who aren't at least a bit familiar, when we say CCY, we're talking about this proposed symmetry in nature,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It
Okay.
suggests this really elegant relationship between particles of different angular momentum bosons and fermions. Like every boson, say a photon, would have a fermionic partner, and vice versa.
And this pairing, this partnership, it has the potential to answer some seriously big questions in particle physics, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We're talking about explaining things like the mass of the Higgs boson or the very nature of dark matter.
Big stuff. But what really stood out to me in these excerpts was Witten's focus on 3D gauge theory. It's not just theoretical, is it?
Not at all. While we experience the world in 4 dimensions, there's a whole lot of research suggesting the possibility of these extra hidden dimensions.
Whoa. Hidden dimensions. Okay.
And by studying gauge theory in 3 dimensions, we gain these valuable insights into these reduced dimension worlds, which can actually have huge implications for understanding our own 4D universe.
But we're talking about more than just abstract math here. We're talking about potential glimpses into the fundamental fabric of reality.
Exactly.
Now, to probe these 3D gauge theories, Witten uses this tool called the Supersymmetric Index. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Sure. Think of the supersymmetric index like a census, but for a quantum system. It lets us count how many bosonic and fermionic states exist at the lowest energy level.
Okay, a quantum census. Got it.
And if they balance out, it supports SY. If not, well, it suggests SY might be broken. Those hypothetical partner particles might not exist after all.
A cosmic accounting system, looking for any discrepancies that could make or break UCY.
Exactly.
But I have to be honest, the math in Witten's paper is pretty intense. How can we even begin to grasp his analysis without getting lost in a sea of equations?
Witten uses this clever strategy called effective field theory. It's like focusing on the broad strokes of a painting before getting caught up in the tiny details. This simplification allows him to make connections to other well-established theories.
Elegant connections. I love it. And speaking of connections, he also brings in Chern-Simons theory.
Ah, yes, Chern-Simons theory. It's fascinating because it focuses on the overall shape and structure of a system, not the tiny details.
So it's kind of like the system could be doing a million different things, but as long as the overall shape stays the same, those properties hold.
Exactly. And that's crucial for understanding the system's behavior.
This is where I start to see the real beauty of Witten's work. He's weaving together these threads of theoretical physics into something much more meaningful.
He's a master at that.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What are some of the key findings that emerge from all of this? What should we really be paying attention to?
Well, one of the most surprising findings is what happens to the strength of the interactions within the theory. This strength is represented by a value called K. And get this, Witten found that K actually shifts because of quantum effects.
Wait, a shifting K, now you've got my attention. Why is that a big deal? What does it even mean for K to shift like that?
It's subtle, but it's huge for understanding interactions at the quantum level. You see, if K is an integer, it has profound implications for the theory's consistency. But this shift leads to something called the parity anomaly.
Parity anomaly, huh? That sounds ominous. What is that?
Well, it means the theory doesn't behave symmetrically under spatial reflection, and that's weird. It challenges our basic assumptions about how these theories should work.
So this seemingly minor detail about K throws a wrench into everything we thought we knew. Does this have any impact on the million-dollar question? Does SY hold up?
That's the question, isn't it? Witten's findings suggest that for large values of K, SY seems to remain unbroken. But for small values, things get a bit murkier.
Murky, how so?
There's this gap, a range where K is small and SY might actually be broken.
A gap where the fate of SY hangs in the balance. Talk about upping the stakes. But Witten wouldn't just leave us hanging like that, would he? What happens when he dives into this mysterious gap?
You're right, he takes it a step further, focusing on the theory on a torus, basically a donut shape.
We're putting SY on a donut now. Okay, theoretical physics never disappoints. I love it. But why a donut? What's so special about that shape?
It lets him explore the vacuum structure in a much richer way.
And just for clarity, when we say vacuum structure, we're talking about...
The lowest energy state of the system. The ground floor, so to speak.
Okay, so I've got Sui's Y, maybe broken, maybe not, hanging out on a donut-shaped universe.
Yeah.
Got it. What did he find down there?
And this is where it gets really interesting. In 3 dimensions, even the vacuum itself can have knots.
Hold on. Knots in the vacuum. I need a minute to process that.
It's a completely foreign concept in higher dimensions, but in 3 dimensions, it changes everything.
It's like saying empty space can be tied in a knot. I mean, how does that even...
It's mind-bending, right?
Yeah.
It just shows how different and complex physics can be in those lower dimensions. And these knots, they challenge everything we thought we knew about fundamental concepts like confinement and the Higgs phase. It really makes you question what we even mean by empty space, doesn't it?
It really does. But speaking of challenging assumptions, Witten also dives into confinement and the Higgs phase. I feel like those knots in the vacuum might be connected to how we understand these phases of matter, right?
You're onto something. It's not just about the knots themselves, though they do play a role. Witten's work suggests that our usual understanding of confinement and the Higgs phase, it might be a bit too simplistic, especially when we're talking about 3 dimensions.
Okay, so before we get too far into those complexities, can we just do a quick recap of confinement and the Higgs phase?
Of course. So picture a bunch of particles all interacting within a system. Now, in a confining phase, the interactions are super strong, so strong that the particles can't exist on their own. They're bound together.
Like quarks stuck inside a proton, held together by the strong force.
Perfect example. Now, the Higgs phase, it offers a different way to think about how particles gain mass. In this phase, particles can move around more freely, but they interact with the Higgs field. And this interaction, it's like they're moving through this cosmic molasses, this resistance. It's what gives them mass.
So not exactly free, but not completely confined either, somewhere in between. But what you're saying is that Witten's exploration of 3D gauge theory, it adds another layer of complexity to all of this.
Exactly. His analysis suggests that in 3 dimensions, especially with that shifting K value we talked about, gauge theories can exhibit phases that don't fit neatly into our confinement or Higgs phase boxes. It's like discovering these entirely new states of matter with completely different properties.
New states of matter. Okay, now that's exciting. And those must have some pretty wild implications for how we understand the universe at its most fundamental level. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I want to bring our listeners back in, just in case anyone took a quick detour to a higher dimension.
Always a good idea.
So, to recap, we're exploring Edward Witten's work on supersymmetry and gauge theory. And we've encountered this curious case of the shifting K and those mind-bending knots in the vacuum.
And we're starting to see how all of these concepts, they challenge our existing understanding of confinement and the Higgs phase.
Yeah.
The possibilities in these lower dimensional worlds are truly fascinating.
It's like we're putting together this giant, complicated puzzle piece by piece, but we're not just after the individual pieces, are we? What's the bigger picture here? What's Witten trying to show us?
Witten's work is so compelling because it's not just theoretical, it's not just an intellectual exercise. It has the potential to change how we understand the universe at the most basic level.
Because these lower dimensional systems, with their strange properties and behaviors, they give us a new way to view our own reality, right?
Exactly.
It's like that idea that as above, so below. We can learn about the vastness of the cosmos by studying the tiniest particles.
Precisely. And in this case, those lower dimensions, they might hold the key to unlocking some of the biggest mysteries in the universe.
But knowing Witten, he wouldn't just give us a peek and leave it at that. He always pushes the boundaries. So where does he go from there? What's next?
So we've been on this incredible journey, haven't we? Through supersymmetry, gauge theory, these unexpected behaviors that pop up in lower dimensions. It's been a wild ride.
It really has. But, Witten's work, it's not just about the math, as elegant as it is. It's about tackling those fundamental questions about everything.
And one of those big questions, maybe the biggest one in this whole field, is whether those superpartner particles, the ones CSY predicts, if they actually exist. Right. And remember that gap we talked about, where Sui's Y might break down? Well, if Sui's Y is broken at those lower energies, those superpartners, they might be even harder to find than we thought.
So it's like we're looking for a needle in a cosmic haystack.
It wouldn't completely disprove Sui's Y, but it would definitely make experimental verification a whole lot tougher.
But even if we never actually observe these superpartners directly, Just the search itself has taught us so much, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's pushed the boundaries of our understanding, forced us to come up with entirely new theoretical frameworks. And that's the beauty of theoretical physics, isn't it? It's not always about finding all the answers. Sometimes it's about refining the questions.
It pushes us to imagine possibilities we might never have considered otherwise.
Exactly. And if Susie Y doesn't hold up the way we originally thought it might, well, it just means we need to keep exploring, keep searching for those underlying principles that govern the universe.
It's a good reminder that science is about discovery, about constantly testing our assumptions against what we observe. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Witten's work, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
For me, it's the audacity of it all. We're using math, we're using our own ingenuity to grapple with these incredibly complex, abstract concepts that exist at the very edge of our understanding. Whether CCY is ultimately confirmed or not, the journey itself, that's what's truly remarkable.
It speaks to that fundamental human desire to understand, to find those hidden connections that tie everything together.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe it's in those unexpected connections, those surprising twists and turns that we'll discover something even more profound than we could have ever imagined.
Now that's something to think about.
Mhm.
A huge thank you to you for guiding us through this incredible world, and to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds curious and never stop questioning.